You can also turn. Thank you very much, Solomon. Thank you also for the invitation to Delft, to the Berlage. Well, the title is still the same as last year, but we advanced a little bit. It's still modelings of the Earth crust. And yeah, I want to say hello to everybody who is listening to it and looking at it. And I warn you a little bit because today I want to talk about something that has occupied my mind for quite some time now. It's a number, it's 420 parts per million, 420 ppm. A number? Yes, but this number, among others, marks a kind of turning point, a difficult state of imbalance, which I will try to lay out in this lecture. But now let me first explain and clarify the title, The Modelings of the Earth Crust. Our office is now 32 years old, and over the course of our career, we have been able to translate some of our ideas into material. Here and there, we selectively modified the Earth crust, reshaped it, remodeled it in different locations, of course, only with varying concepts for multiple purposes. We created space for us humans, space for living, space for working, space for art, space for life, extra space on the surface of the Earth. I like the idea of architecture as a narration of the Earth's surface. The notion of an interlocking of the heavy crust with the light atmosphere. I've sometimes called it a narrative. And yes, most of our buildings still make me proud. But in the past 3 years, I have started to look deeper in this airy, elusive part. In 2018, just a tiny little bit before the rise of Greta Thunberg and the Friday for Future movement, I planned a semester at the ETH Zurich, collaborating with Arno Schlüter's chair of Architecture and Building Systems. We wanted the students' architectural projects to consider energy consumption, also the embodied energy of building materials, and the respective CO2 emissions. And all of this is not my area of expertise. Of course, it's not my subject matter. I'm an architect, I'm not a scientist, but I will try to explain it anyway. To describe my mindset, I have to go back to the 1970s. While in middle school, we discussed the Club of Rome's report, The Limits to Growth. We were alarmed then. However, over the following decades, the predicted depletion of natural resources was constantly shifted into the future. And it seemed that society and science and politics, also the industry, kept finding solutions for ecological problems just in time. Mostly, they were technical solutions: sewage treatment plants against water pollution, waste incineration plants against the mountains of rubbish, catalytic converters enforced then against car emissions, the ban of CFCs and other pollutants, better heating systems and exhaust gas treatment, LED lamps to replace light bulbs, better thermal insulation of buildings to save energy, etc. But in spite of all our efforts, other problems appear insurmountable and increasingly so. The vast quantity of plastic in the oceans, the loss of biodiversity, and most dramatic global warming due to the greenhouse gas emissions, first of all, CO2. So a substance is supposed to be the main problem, the main driver of global warming, a trace gas, precisely these 420 parts per million of carbon dioxide, CO2. CO2, which we humans exhale, CO2 which plants need for photosynthesis, but also gas which is produced in all combustion processes, that is the burning of coal, of oil, kerosene, gas, also wood. Inconceivable, actually. Matter always mattered in our work. We were fascinated and inspired by different materials. We architects are familiar with solid matter, with building materials. These substances that withstand gravity, the force of the wind, the weather, and whose sensuality we love. The sparkle of glass, the warmth and grain of wood, the sedimentation layers of concrete, the coolness of bare steel, the colors of rusted iron. And even from the little valued soft insulation materials, we were able to gain inspiration. This is a picture from an early exhibition of our work in 1993 in Lucerne, with a material wreck as the main object. However, the building materials stand in relation to other substances, to fuels and pollutants. In fact, we all lack an intuitive imagination of these counterparts, the liquids and gases that contain energy, or of electricity and energy without substance, or their quantitative relations and units of measure. For most of us, the image of these substances and types of energy manifests itself primarily through their appliances, containers, screens, and control equipment, pipes, ducts, tanks, lines, switches, intakes, and exhausts. We place them in the basement. We make them disappear in recesses. We cover them up, bury them in concrete because their expression seems too arbitrary, too technical to us, and of course, most important, for reasons of safety. Even less do we have a grasp of the carbon footprint that our buildings leave in the atmosphere, or more generally, our way of life. 40% of worldwide CO2 emissions are presumably caused by buildings and households for heating, cooling, hot water, electric appliances, etc. So my idea of architecture as a marriage between the Earth's crust and the atmosphere looks now less romantic. And the partnership has gone seriously out of balance. We try to express this turning point in another exhibition in Berlin with the title Urbanable. This was in fall 22, in which we took part as members of the Berlin Academy of Arts. It was organized by Matthias Sauerbruch, Jan Walter Timrinitz. And sadly, due to the pandemic, the exhibition had to close too early. Our contribution, prepared together with Arend Kölsch, Arno Schlüter and Lars Müller, consisted only of an installation of 3 screens and 1 chair, and a spatial frame of a concrete formwork structure. The structure was the common denominator for all the 35 contributions in the exhibition, and was afterwards returned to its original purpose. Likewise, now I would like to recycle the contents for my lecture today. On the screen to the left, we show the critical retrospective of our work. Opposite, we showed student works from our design courses at ETH Zurich, and in the middle, we formulated statements, questions, and doubts. By means of selected projects, I will now outline how we have dealt with materials over the course of time, with building materials, but also with environmental materials. We have always practiced building as a way of exploring the world, the environment, in German, the Umwelt. In doing so, we have repeatedly opened operated within the field of ecology or made tentative approaches, also on unconventional paths. And decade after decade, we increased the dimensions of the insulation layers, often ahead with what building regulations prescribed. But today we must seriously and self-critically ask ourselves, did we do enough? Was this enough? The Kirchner Museum in Davos is at the altitude of 1,500 meters, has glazed superstructures, skylights, that not only serve as daylight equalizers, but also as buffers for the climate in the exhibition rooms below. Snow gathering on the roofs may stay, as you saw in the photograph before, as daylight enters through the lateral windows. We wanted to feature the new climatic building requirements then, and therefore revealed the construction of the wall. So the insulation panels on the opaque concrete walls of the exhibition rooms show through the edged glass. You can see this here. But the insulation, which was state of the art at the time, would now be twice as thick. But for the first time, we used waste glass taken out of the recycling process on the roofs instead of the usual gravel. The recycling of used glass in Switzerland was then introduced in the late 80s. And it's still sparkling when you look on Google Earth on the museum. A mostly closed, well-insulated building with a robust envelope and few openings for skylights and windows are the features to guarantee low maintenance and low operating costs for the museum Liener in Appenzell, because it's a private foundation and gets no subsidies. Today it's called Kunstmuseum Appenzell. All the exhibition rooms are lit by north-facing skylights in order to avoid direct sunlight on the works of art. But the skylight in the entry space, the gathering space, is directed towards south, looks south. The walls are made of load-bearing and insulated, aerated concrete blocks. This white material we call itong, the material you build single detached family houses with, cheap material, insulating. And additionally, they have ventilated exterior insulation clad with sheets of stainless steel. It was the first building that we equipped with a brine water heat pump. And the parameters were really great at their time, but they're still good today. The total energy consumption of the building for heating, cooling, humidity regulation, lighting, hot water, and all appliances in the museum is only about 50 kilowatt hour per square meter a year. But what about the embodied energy invested in the robust stainless steel facade? Yes, hopefully it may be written off, maybe amortized ecologically over many decades. The subsidized housing development Brunnenhof was the first project where we met the Swiss sustainable building standard Minergie Eco. 2 buildings with 5 to 6 stories contain a total of 75 spacious apartments for families with 3 or more children. The location is interesting and unusual. The back of the project faces a noisy street to the west, but the front looks into a public park with a small zoo. Only the kitchen faces the street, whereas all the other rooms face the park. The most luxurious space is probably a balcony which runs the length of the facade facing the park. Sliding panels of transparent and translucent glass serve as wind and sun protection, and they also screen the view from outside. They create a lively impression, together with the plants, furniture, toys, and laundry of the occupants. The exterior cladding of opaque glass conceals 20 centimeter thick layer of insulation, rock wool, and brick and recycled concrete was used then for the load-bearing structure. District heating and warm water is provided by the nearby waste incineration plant. And according to calculations, the building should consume only 25 kilowatt hours per square meter per year for heating alone. So this is this graph showing it for several projects, several buildings, but this is our Brunnenhof project. Now, but measurements of the actual consumption read twice the amount of energy. So this is the truth, the white column. And why is that so? Is it a miscalculation or too attractive balconies so that adults and children are tempted to leave the French windows open? Actually, we don't know. The Swiss Museum of Transport in Lucerne welcomes its visitors with this new iridescent building, whose glass facades veil shiny scrap metal in the form of rims, propellers, ship crews, cogs. Just a few are from the museum collection. Most were bound for the scrapyard. The metal pieces are mounted on a grating in the cavity between cladding and insulation. It is a not entirely uncritical tribute to the wheel, the nucleus of mechanized locomotion. This was building 1. Building 2. We considered also for building 2 for the road transport hall using scrap metal. We studied the recycling of automobiles in Switzerland. First, the wrecks are pressed to efficient transportation. We proposed using these flattened bodies as cladding for the new hall. We liked the juxtaposition. On the inside, the well-groomed vintage cars. On the outside, the wrecks that would be left to the ravages of time. The client approved the solution, but the automotive industry, as prospective sponsors, did not. A different solution had to be found. Road signs are also a source of scrap metal. We ended up covering the facades with used and new traffic signage. With duplicated ones, and also with some misleading signs of our own invention. We reversed the used signs that face the surroundings. The road transport hall was our first building to be equipped with a photovoltaic system. A high-rise, like the Prime Tower office building in Zurich, has considerable urban potential. It can accentuate an emerging district like Zurich West. In spite of its height, it can communicate with the neighbors, with older industrial structures as well as new buildings. By its placement and height, it can create public open spaces like the Marktplatz next to HArquitectes station. This is the Marktplatz and this is HArquitectes station. And it can offer a view of the city from the public restaurant at the top. It can play with the light and changes in appearance depending on the weather. especially when its facades are made of glass. But what does a high-rise, notably a fully glazed one, have to do with ecology? Well, thanks to certain properties and measures, the building has in fact been awarded a number of eco-labels like Minergie, LEED, Gold, etc. And this is why the office high-rise has a large floor area. It's very compact, with 1,400 to 1,600 square meters per story. The total floor area is 3 times as much as the corresponding envelope surface. And the facade panels consist of insulating triple glazing with low U value, medium light transmittance, and medium G value. The latter is further improved by inner automatically controlled blinds. And for the well-being of the occupants, every other window can be individually opened up to 7 centimeters during spring and autumn to allow fresh air. A ventilation function that can be centrally overridden when outside temperatures are too high or too low. But is this user-friendly operating option may be responsible for the great variations in heating and cooling demand among different tenants? For the heating, the building uses mainly groundwater and district heating only to cover the peak demands. And to its ecological credit, the building provides only 150 parking spaces for the 2,000 employees working there, because it's located next to Hartbrücke train station, as we heard. But if the building had been executed as we had proposed it in the competition with a ventilated double layer glass facade, would consumption values be better, or would we just see a higher share of embodied energy? Today, at least 20 kilowatt hours per square meter a year are needed for heating and about twice as much for cooling. So around 60 kilowatt hours per square meter a year in minimum, which is not bad, but yeah. In our next office building, we were able then to implement a double layer ventilated glass facade. Here at the Wirthaus in Rorschach, the outer glass layer muffles the noise of the busy road. Oh, I should go further. And it also protects against wind coming from Lake Constance in the north. The textile sun blinds are sheltered in the facade interstice. The outer glass layer is inlaid with a fine mesh that has a metallic sheen. And this mesh reflects about 25% of sunlight without impairing the view from the inside. The panels are mounted at varying angles, allowing for ventilation of the interstice and also creating a play of light. And the building not only plays with light, it also works with it. 2,000 square meters of thin film solar panels, photovoltaic panels, meet part of the electricity demand. And recycled glass was employed here again, green one this time. All the roof surfaces are equipped with solar panels, and the heating and cooling needs are entirely served by lake water. And what about recent buildings? The housing complex Zollikerstraße features heating with ground source heat pump, 20 centimeter thermal insulation, triple glazing, but has large windows. The office high-rise Andreasturm uses district heating from the waste incineration plant, parapets with 18 centimeter thermal insulation, triple glazing, and an outer glass panel, and sun blinds in the interstice. Analogous like the Wirth building. The office building Claridenstrasse is heated and cooled with lake water heat pumps, supplemented with solar panels on the roof, 22 centimeter thermal insulation, triple glazing. But there are lots of windows, and for user convenience, again, individual operable ventilation flaps are installed that users may as well forget to close. The residential building in Küsnacht has fewer window openings, 26 centimeter thermal insulation, but is still heated with natural gas. And the combined office and hotel building in Green City, Manek, Zurich, is heated and cooled with prime water heat pump, has 20 to 24 centimeter insulation, and photovoltaic panels on the roof, and only around 50% openings. And other more recent projects under construction, which had a long way until they became a project to be built. And this is a rendering, not a photo. The extension of the Josef Albers Museum Quadrat in Bottrop, Germany, is still under construction, and it will be completed this year. It has again only a few openings. It's very compact, has triple glazing, 26 centimeter thermal insulation, and is heated with district heating, but which is produced with fossil fuel still. The section with the sawtooth roof with its windows orientated towards north-northeast. On the screen, and photovoltaic panels on the back of the sawtooth roof towards south-southwest were not part of the brief, not part of the program. So they will not be executed, but maybe, hopefully, in the future, there will be a budget for it. Rendering from the back, the delivery entrance. A further building at the Traffic Museum Lucerne will be complemented in 2023. It will serve multiple purposes. It will provide a second entry to the museum, huge exhibition space on the ground floor, 3 conference rooms and offices. It will be equipped with 30 centimeter insulation, thermal insulation, with a thin perforated steel facade to absorb the street noise against the neighbors instead of reflecting it. And it shows photovoltaic panels on the facades, a few only towards the north. More PVs, photovoltaic panels, are mounted towards the east and the south, where they can work more efficiently. Besides producing electricity, they also form a pattern on the facades, an ornament with the unpopular elements. This was a collaboration with Urs Beat Roth, an artist who helped us with this formulation of the pattern. Of course, the roof is also packed with photovoltaic panels. And furthermore, the heating and cooling, not only for this building, but for all buildings in the Traffic Museum, will be provided with a new heat pump in the basement of this new building. But due to the difficult foundation on this terrain, and also the huge exhibition hall in the ground floor without posts, the building structure is mainly concrete. Now, back in the exhibition in Berlin again, we showed their student works from the semester 2019-2020 on the screen to the right. Let me show you the task and the few works. During autumn semester 2019, material metabolism, in German it reads quite nicely, Stoffwechsel, the students were asked to investigate how multi-story residential buildings situated in a dense urban environment could be designed as zero energy houses or maybe even zero emission buildings. Quite a target. The fictional construction sites in Zurich were all different. Building sites on busy streets were chosen, each today occupied by a gas station. The use and integration of photovoltaic panels in the design was an important issue. Not an easy task and still unpopular with many architects and clients, including us. Aside from that, organic building materials like wood, hemp, straw were to be considered as temporary carbon storage. In the exhibition in Berlin, we showed several works. Let me pick just two of them. Both were designed for the site Birmensdorfer Straße, part of a perimeter block, which is occupied today by a setback building. Quite a nice one, I think, with access galleries on the back. Student Moritz Dutli proposes remodeling instead of replacing the existing building. The single-room studios were developed into different duplex-type apartments. The present load-bearing structure remains largely intact. It's the black walls and the red additions in wood. The extensions in wood and the new top floor are added to the existing volume. It's also visible in this section. And two additional steel structures create a new layer of access galleries towards the courtyard, and also a layer of balconies towards the street to the south. On the double high loggias, photovoltaic panels form parapets as well as sunshades, kind of brise-soleil. The added metal racks also protect the new wooden facades. And the street line of the block is re-established, although in a different way. The student Tim Vogel also worked on Birmensdorfer Straße. He extended the existing volume towards the street in the south. The former single-room apartments are connected to form larger units now. Facing the courtyard, they have each a social private open-air space as part of the gallery, of the access gallery. The street facade to the south consists of various solar panels. Monocrystalline photovoltaic elements of different sizes receive a red color coating, but in various intensities. So dimensions and degrees of transparency are matched to generate compatible voltages so that the modules can be efficiently connected in series. This is the potential, and looks quite nice. It forms a subtle play with these dimensions and visibility and masking of the PV elements. They make together for a very convincing facade. Kind of invention. Well, and in the center of the exhibition on the white screen, there was room for statements, questions, and doubts. Buildings that require little or no external energy for heating or cooling, buildings that generate energy surplus, buildings that act as carbon sinks. Yes, this is feasible today. But having learned more about this topic, we would now rather say buildings that act as carbon deposits for a while. Now, this is how this can be achieved, with more thermal insulation, with brine water heat pumps, with photovoltaics, solar thermal energy, with wood as construction material, not a fuel, with less window area, with recycling, upcycling, without oil, without natural gas, without coal. All that and more is well established and tested. But we still have questions about the balance between operational and embodied energy, about greenhouse emissions, including production, transport, and disposal across the whole life circle. The subject is highly complex, and the greenhouse gases are invisible. Lots of data, facts, and figures are available, but dealing with them is a time-consuming Herculean task for each project. We urgently need comparable numbers, measured values, parameters. We need clear, user-friendly tools, that is, standardized but location-sensitive greenhouse gas calculators. And yes, all of us to increase our literacy in terms of climate and energy. Since then, we try to dig deeper in the complex field of energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Also, we try to get deeper also in the field of our beloved materials. We try to become more informed about the life cycle analysis of building materials with unexpected results. In the autumn semester 2021, we repeated and expanded the 2019 concept. The preparation resulted in a 300-page reader and in a vademecum to keep useful data handy. Well, this is how they looked. Besides the reader and the vademecum, with quite some facts and figures on energy, primary energy, embodied energy, and greenhouse data, besides talks with professionals and scientists, besides tracking current newspaper articles on the climate issue, we installed an ad hoc exhibition at the Architecture Library Material Hub at ETH. An exhibition which showed materials in relation to the numbers. The numbers on embodied energy and greenhouse gas emissions per square meter, which students calculated. For the design task, the students could choose one of several existing buildings in Zurich, office buildings mainly, and older than 50 years. The buildings should not be demolished, but be converted and extended into mixed-use office buildings, housing and office buildings, a combination of both. The combined operational and embodied energy consumption, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions, should be reduced to a minimum by also making use of building integrated solar energy. And of course, the ambition was that the existing buildings should benefit from the changes also in aesthetic terms. You could say the recycling, or a kind of recycling of the building structure by minimal transformation, by not demolishing it. Here are some examples from the final presentation in December. Again, this 3-story office building in Winterthur, at Winterthurer Straße from the 1960s, was one of the properties to be transformed with a close-up. And here the student Simon Schwager added 2.5 stories for housing. The building has photovoltaic elements on the parapets on the upper floors. And it has a pergola with photovoltaic panels on the top floor. The section shows the extension together with the facades and the ground plan of the apartments on top. This was the addition. And the students, all the students, also calculated the energy yields of photovoltaic system. And all of them calculated the future demand of operational energy for heating, warm water, and also for electricity, in comparison with the energy yields of the photovoltaic elements, in comparison with the invested embodied energy. A former warehouse on Badener Straße, today used as an office building, was to be transformed to a skeleton building. The student Ines Rauses added 2 to 3 floors and used photovoltaics on the facades. The floor plan shows new staircases to access the new apartments, 3 of them. Only the northern corner towards the street, here the offices were maintained, were kept, and also the staircase. The student Rainer Bernecker added 3 floors. This was possible because it was a former warehouse with a lot of capacity in the structure. She found a solution with photovoltaic glass bricks for the parapets. And the interesting ground plans in combination with the section with access galleries and balconies formed a very convincing solution for the extension of the former warehouse. This was quite a nice work she did. Many possibilities to use the ground plan. On Badener Straße 571, a brick office building from the 40s had to be extended with housing usage on the roof. Here the student Simon Mauron added 2 stories to create 6 maisonette townhouses on top of the building. To do so, he included one of the existing stories. The roof is formed as a sawtooth roof, including terraces to allow privacy and shelter from the busy street, as well as, here are the terraces, as well as more surface for the photovoltaic modules. The elevations show an interesting differentiation of the facades. Industrial, looking towards the busy street, and like a row of elevated terraced houses towards the south. Here, the photovoltaic panels form sliding shutters or are fixed to the wall. Well, you might have realized the semester was not about iconic architecture. Instead, it was about competent, careful handling of existing building fabric and its retrofitting and transfer into the future. A future without fossil fuels. A future also where living and working may move closer together. But nevertheless, the skillful balance between old and new is an art in terms of energy and greenhouse gases, of course, with regards to functions, of course, and in terms of design. The 30 students got quite far with their projects, to my opinion. Let me end the lecture with a quotation of Luce Irigaray. She wrote in 1983 in L'oubli de l'air. Cet élément irréductiblement constitutif du tout ne s'impose ni à la perception ni à la connaissance. Toujours là, il se laisse oublier. Today, when modeling the earth crust with solid materials, we can no longer afford to be forgetful about the atmosphere. We need to know more about both. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Your building in real life. So I was wondering if how much control should we insert in the building that we design? Should we design smaller bathtubs so that people in the building use less energy, use less resource too? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. I still think people should have freedom to use their buildings and not be restricted in many ways. Nevertheless, I think we have to be very careful about how much energy is needed to construct them, and how much energy is needed for operational use. And I think it's a balance we have to be careful about. But of course, I think it's important that we can open a window, or we can open a flap of window. Of course, this has also to do with the energy prices. Energy became in the last decades so cheap that we do not have to care about it anymore. So this is one of the drivers of this problem we have with the greenhouse gases. It's a commodity energy. No.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for this amazing lecture. I was wondering, you presented many museums and offices buildings, and today the evolution and the innovations on the materials are it's bigger than it used to be in the past. And I was wondering if you think that this will add to the design and the flexibility on shaping the buildings in the future. And by materials, I'm referring not only into earth-based and hemp-based materials like you saw us here briefly, but also other alternatives. And yeah, mainly if this will help for the future into the shaping of the buildings.
No, I just lost you. Just 1 second. 1 second. No, here I am. Yeah, it's fine. You know, using office buildings as a building substance to be changed is easier than using housing buildings, because they have higher spans very often. They have higher floors. So it's more easy to put something in it, and they are kind of conceived most of the time to be flexible. And I think it's after this COVID pandemic, we learned that we can be present without being present one-to-one. So we can work at home too, and I think this will be used in the future. This was a lesson we learned. And remodeling office buildings has also another advantage. Very often from the 70s in Switzerland, they have higher load-bearing capacities than housing projects. They have around 300 kilograms per square meter. So you can. This allows you to add 1 or 2 to 3 stories sometimes. It's always about 20% of the whole building floors you can add on in. So this is why we use these office buildings. And I think then using different materials, it's kind of it's just a kind of triad that can be do with biogenic materials, which act as a carbon deposit. Of course, quite often they still have the problem that they can be they are not fireproof, or they might even might lose their insulation capacities with time. We still have to do some research on this, and we still have to also to look how the ancient people worked with these materials, because it's not new, it's just a kind of reinvention. Yeah. And I think there's still, it's still a kind of beginning, but I think it's an interesting track to go and to find out how could we keep building substance, not demolishing these buildings, and trying to nevertheless to densify in the cities which are growing like Zurich is. So this is the question we try to ask and to answer in this semester. Is this kind of try to answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. And also have a second question. In general, bioclimatic design is considered a very technical design, and with all the calculations that need to be done. So I was wondering, how, as an architect, do you integrate this process into your projects in order to shape them easily and go a little bit outside from the parameters that you have from all these calculations? And if it's easy, of course.
No, I think it's really difficult to get an overview of what you can do and what the different parts of the materials bring, because it's also depending all the time where do the materials come from. Do they have long transportation behind them, which makes them again loaded with the CO2 production and energy production and energy consumption. And I think, in general, I just can say that there is a huge task in front of us, of all of us. How can we kind of remodel and translate all the existing buildings into a new standard which will be much more CO2 friendly? And do we have to tear down all of them, or do we find answers for them in terms of good functions and also aesthetic design? But I'm also interested, and this is maybe unusual at your school and at our school too, to find solutions which are kind of not only eye-catching. They might be if the building asks for something which has to be eye-catching, but also kind of normal, super normal, in order that you can build or generate again streets and a part of the city which are kind of in combination come together as beautiful wholes. So it's not only about the unique selling proposition, the USP, but also about how do we find ways of convincing many people to do a good thing towards in this transformation into the future. So, maybe a little bit unconventional way to look at it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Ini. Thank you for your lecture. And in your early work, we see a lot of museums, and from recently, you have a more.
Can you speak up a little bit louder? I cannot hear you.
Like in your early work, there's a lot of museum, and now you like more housing and office. And I'm wondering, like this is like very different two type buildings, like public and private. Is there any like transformation when you like selecting the material of all this building? Is there how like for you how different is it for you to selecting the material within these two building types?
Look, I think we look at all the tasks we get. We try to have a specific look at every task we have. It might be a very common thing like housing, or it might, or offices, or it might be a special task like a museum. And it's and we, as I try to explain, with all the materials we used, it's a kind of way to deal with different tasks and different sites and different points on the Earth crust and different functions. And so we tried to, very often we try to start anew and have a kind of new look at things. And that we started with museums, it was just a lucky strike that we won a museum right at the beginning of our career. So we have been invited to more of them. And it took some time until we could build also housing projects and office buildings, the kind of normal things. Yeah. And we wouldn't, you know, of course, it's nice to build museums. It's great because it has you deal then with people which are very much sensitive on the aesthetic things and on conceptual things. But you find these kind of people and clients, if you're lucky, also with the housing projects. Yeah. So, trying to use different materials, I think it's not so much related to the function, rather the expression is a bit more related to the function. So although the museums are not kind of totally eye-catching, I think, we try to have a kind of restrained attitude towards them, but nevertheless they are more eye-catching than housing projects. Yeah, but sometimes even the housing projects have been eye-catching because we used colors there. So there is not even a real common denominator, and I think we changed in expression and in also loudness in the various projects. We changed again and again. Yeah. More eye-catching and less and more restrained. It was a kind of not bound to functions. This is rather a kind of try to explore different functions, different types, different materials, and create for every spot on the earth one thing which is needed there and need to be invented for this spot of the earth crust. To come back to this metaphor. Was it something which you can? Is it the answer you can live with? Is it okay? Good.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you again. I do not have a specific question, I suppose just a comment. And I would just like to say, in the past, I had a few classmates of mine, and we were talking about the Andreas term in Oerlikon, and many of my classmates said, oh, what is this office building doing here? In Oerlikon, everything is so flat, and here's this building, and it seems so out of place. And to be honest, maybe a part of me agreed. However, hearing you talk about the way you talk about your process and your consideration of responsibility and materials, now it suddenly makes more sense why the Andreas term is the way it is. The the massing, the facade, the subtle cuts. I really do appreciate this sort of way of thinking about design and integrating responsibility into the way that things are realized. And maybe perhaps it is not immediately apparent from first impression. However, there is the thought is there. So that is just my comment to you. Thank you.
Maybe you have a comment to the comment. Yeah. Just to add to the Andreas room, it's also on a train station, and it's part of a development which will bring up other high rises too. So it's you must know that the train, the SBB in Switzerland, Federal Train Organization, what's the translation, is having round on very specific good locations in all Swiss cities and also in Oerlikon. And so they because they also want to develop the traffic without automobiles, they have the intention to develop these parcels. So this is why it was meant to be, it was a competition, it was meant to be a high-rise of 80 meters at the competition, and others will come. So that it won't last too long until there are more high-rises around Oerlikon. So comment to the comment.
Leading by example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annette. We look forward to welcoming you again in person. So thank you for thinking through your work in another way. So have a good evening.
You too.
Touch. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Enjoy being together. Bye-bye, Solomon.